Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Supporting and Engaging Volunteers. This is a part of our Volunteer Management Basics series that is presented by the Michigan Community Service Commission. And I know I say this every time, but this was designed when we had some funding from AmeriCorps, the agency, for the Volunteer Generation Fund. We're still doing the work of the Volunteer Generation Fund, which was to increase the number of volunteers in the state of Michigan and really help organizations build their capacity to be able to utilize our amazing residents who volunteer in the state. So, with that, we may ask at some point for a little information to help share the story of volunteerism in the state. And when we reach out to you, we'll probably have like a little survey link and we'll ask you for some information. The information is things like, hey, could you share your volunteer numbers and your volunteer hours? Nothing confidential by any means, but we would love to be able to have that information so we can be able to use that for further funding to support resources for you. And just like this, when our resources tend to be free to you because we're the state of Michigan. And so it's really important that we are able to tell that story. So thank you for your support on that. So we are delighted to have you with us. Um, oh my gosh. As you know, if you've been on these, I'm really good at going past my slides. I want to do a quick introduction and then acknowledge my right-hand person, Katie, Katie Alexander. So I'm Melissa Sherry, and I'm the Volunteer Impact Coordinator for the state of Michigan here with the commission. And what I do is I support both volunteerism and disaster services. So I'm wearing my volunteerism hat right now. I have about 25 years of experience, or maybe even a little more than that now, with supporting volunteers and running volunteer programs. And I absolutely love this field of work, and I absolutely love the opportunity to be able to share what I've learned. And I'm joined today with Katie Alexander. She's an AmeriCorps Vista, and we're delighted to have her. She's going to be letting folks in and she'll run the chat. Katie, do you want to introduce yourself and say hi?
Hi, everyone. Like Melissa said, I'm Katie Alexander with AmeriCorps, and I'll be helping out today. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, here's our agenda today. We're going to talk about, in terms of supporting and engaging volunteers, what is your role? What role do you have in that? And we're going to talk about kind of seeing ourselves a little differently. We're going to talk about talent management. I don't know if you've ever seen yourself as a talent manager, but here's a hint, you are. And we're going to talk about volunteer leadership. We're going to present an evidence-based model that's in practice that you can adapt and utilize as it fits in your organization. As you know, I never say, well, this is the way you have to do it, or this is the one and only best practice. It has to work for your organization. I'm going to give you some tips for great support that leads to higher volunteer engagement and belonging, things like that. And we're going to talk about getting feedback from our volunteers. Any thoughts or questions about that before we move on? Anything you think we're missing? You can put it in the chat too. And I have my first question here. How do you see your role and what is your comfort level with supervision? I want you to think about that internally for a minute. Are you comfortable in that role? I have to honestly say that I was not always comfortable being that supervisor that seemed very heavy. It seemed very authoritative. It seemed very like top down to me. Like even when I have people that I work with, I have always said I don't like that word boss. Boss seems to be like I'm looking down at you, or that I need to support you, but you also support me. We work together. And your role is really a level of guidance and mentorship and coaching is how I kind of best see it. And when you think of a coach, you think of a mentor, you think of support, it gives you a very different feeling about how you are guiding and supervising volunteers. Eh, How do other people feel about that? Do you agree with that? Do you not agree with that? You can come off of mute, it's okay.
Hi, Melanie from Flowers Early Learning Head Start in Southwest Michigan.
Right.
Yeah, I often um, characterize it as I'm here to support you. I'm here to be your point person. I'm here to help guide you through this process. I don't particularly like the idea, especially because they're volunteering their time. I'm not your boss. Like you're giving me your free
Yeah,
time. Like I want to
exactly.
be a support to you, but it does often feel kind of uncomfortable trying to redirect or I don't even want to use the word reprimand, but like, oh, this isn't working out. Like, because then that
Yeah.
that boss mode kind of comes into play when those kind of things happen. So that can kind of feel icky sometimes or not quite know how to navigate it.
Oh my gosh, perfect, 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 because that is exactly what we're going to talk about, Melanie. And I love the fact that that is exactly the way I feel. I kind of almost get like that. I used to always get like almost a that pit in your stomach, like, oh, and it just kind of like gets to my heart because I've supported volunteers, I've guided volunteers, I've supervised volunteers for a long, long time. I've done the same with employees, and I kind of see my role both ways, you know. I feel the same about both of those. A little less so about an employee, but all the same, I struggled with that early on, and I hated that. I just hated this part of my job until I got to the point I started thinking about it differently. And when we were doing a process improvement project at a place that I worked at, I had a light bulb moment. And the light bulb moment was, really when you have to do that redirect or you have to, counsel or things aren't going right, it's really what you're doing is you're coaching. You might be coaching them out, you might be mentoring them out. But I decided we're just going to be honest about this right from the onset. And we would promise them right in the interview that, we're really big on giving feedback. It may be good feedback, it may be constructive feedback, it may be, whatever it is, good, bad, or indifferent. We're going to share that feedback with you and we're going to help along the way. And so then I said I was going to give you feedback. So when I have feedback and I would ask them, how do you feel about that? And generally they want to know. They want to know if they're doing a good job. They want to know. They don't come there to do a bad job or to try to sink your ship by not by any means. So really that changed my whole thought process on feedback and it felt safe. And what I would do when I had tough conversations to share with someone, I would say, "Do you remember when you came in for your interview? Do you remember when we go over our volunteer promise and our promise to you that we said that whatever feedback and opportunities that we had to help you grow and learn that we were going to give them to you?" Oh yeah, I do remember that. And you know what? That to me was like the most powerful thing. And I would always ask them, like when I delivered that part of the speech, about like, "Hey, we're going to give you feedback. How do you feel about that? Is that okay with you? Is there anything I need to know?" And usually, I mean, if there was something, they tell me and I could note that and put it in our database. So before I had this conversation, I would check on our notes and things like that about the person. And then what we could do is I would say, do you remember that? And then they would say, yeah, I remember that. And I'm like, well, I've got some feedback for you. And I would always do that sandwich method of, we want to have a good relationship with you, and we respect you. And so putting that word respect in, people often feel that at the heart of most complaints, and I've dealt with complaints about any and everything you could just about imagine. At the heart of that, they didn't feel respected. And so you put the word respect in, and that puts you on a safer plane with them. So you say, out of respect for you and our deep commitment to having highly engaged volunteers, I do have some feedback for you. And then it was safe. I could do it. And I felt like I was helping them. And then they felt like I was on their side. They felt like I was with them versus against them. And then a lot of times you have to look at what the challenge was. Is it a lack of training? Is it just a bad placement? I've had people that just needed a little more training and they were fine. You know, despite our best efforts, they just didn't get it the first time. And then other times it was, maybe this isn't a great fit. And last time I gave you some tips about how to reject a volunteer, but I can give you some scripting for this one in terms of, how do you have those coaching conversations. But yeah, so I think that there's a lot that we could change that dynamic and make it comfortable and safe for you and for them. And the reality is, they want feedback, especially younger people, but older people appreciate that feedback too. They appreciate the safeness of it, and they want to do a good job. So with that, thinking about your own comfort level, uh, and how you see your role. How do you see your role? Do you see it as, are you that coach? Are you that mentor? But also, you're so much more than that. You're also a relationship manager. And that relationship management part of what you do is so, so very important. So I want you to think about this. Volunteers, and I think this is 1,000% true, volunteers are typically attracted to a cause, but engagement and their retention, oh no, uh-oh, my thing is saying it's gonna, my Microsoft is saying it's gonna um, reload or something like that. I hope that that isn't the case, but volunteer, so I'm sorry. So you think about that. They're attracted to a cause, but engagement is driven by relationships and connections. And that relationship is driven in a lot by you as their volunteer coordinator, director of volunteer services, manager, all those things. They need those personal connections. And it goes back, if you remember from the previous sessions, where I said those three drivers: what you get, what you give, and how that somebody cares about them. And then, so volunteers stay and they make sacrifices to serve because they feel like they belong and they can give of themselves. And you know what? When they talk about their experience, they usually feel that they get more out of the experience and the relationships than we ever realize or that we feel like we're giving them. And I want you to also think about this in terms of relationships. Loneliness and isolation is the, it's the worst thing in the world for people. We're not made like that. That's not who we are at our core. We might be introverts, but people who experience loneliness and isolation, that it contributes to mental health issues. It contributes to um, people not feeling great about themselves. And we are the strongest medication for that, I believe. That connection and other people, bringing them in and, having those relationships and the connections and that love and having a purpose and having a feeling that there is something important for you to be doing with your life. And we can offer that to people. So I'm telling you, when, we talked about recruitment and things like that, and I said, you know, find the most interesting people to go out and do your recruitment for you. Talk to physicians' offices, talk to people who are kind of, who would see people who are isolated, because you have the ability to be that connection. It might be kind of scary for them to come out to do this the first time, but you as a relationship manager, making them feel warm and that warm, inviting invite and that love that they can get from the work that they're going to do, it's going to be amazing. I also see a lot of times in young people, we had a very large uh, teen program. And in that, they always came in the same way, and their heads were down, and they were really shy. And this was overwhelming. I mean, it's a big building, you got a park, and all that kind of crazy stuff. And then once they got a little time under their belt, and all of a sudden you'd see them walking down the hall, and sometimes you wouldn't even recognize a kid sometimes because their heads were held high, and you could always tell who is new and who's more experienced. And it's because they had that comfort and they had that connection. So remember that relationships, those experiences are so vitally important to people, their overall health, how they feel about the world, and their connections. So be a relationship manager. Okay, so relationship managers. So how do we foster relationships um, and the connections through kind of that support lens? So, we get to know our volunteers, which goes back to what we're doing as volunteer leaders. We get to know them, we understand them, we're a part of an extended part of their lives. We may or may not get to know their families, but I would always make sure that, unfortunately, when someone passed, we would go and we would say, thank you for sharing your loved one. And we would hear these stories, and it was incredible to me how much that service meant to them and what it did for them and the connections that they had. And then here's the other thing, understanding their work, understanding what those critical pieces are. And we understand, if we walk in their shoes and we do those roles, we understand where the barriers are, where the challenges are, and we can help them work through that so that they can have a successful experience. That's the job of a leader. The job of a leader is to make their work easier. So I used to have a CEO that would say, he was in a hospital again, and he said, you know what? I don't do surgeries. I don't see patients. I can't fix anything medically wrong with anyone. I can't do the kind of things nurses do. But what I can do is I can take care of the caregivers, and that's his job. Your job is to take care of the volunteers. And it may at sometimes be an emotional connection. It may be guidance on how do you do things. It may come in a lot of different forms, and it may be helping them make those connections in a way that works for them. And, we know that they're unpaid employees. That's the other thing. We can, with that, and the reason I put that in there is that sometimes, and you've heard me say this, that we know when it's time to limit them being there and to be able to set up those opportunities so that someone is going to succeed in those. So that there's, and this means like there's enough support that that one sole volunteer, God bless them, that they don't feel like I have to be here today. I have to do this. And I have to do it tomorrow too. We don't want them here every day. They're not paid employees. When you have a paid employee, you know you've bought 40 hours of time or whatever time it is, and that's your contract with them. Your contract with your volunteer is very different. Your contract with your volunteer is that you will make sure that they are well supported so that they can do their volunteer job, step away, do the rest of their life, come back, do their volunteer job, and step away again. And it doesn't become this overwhelming burden. And when it does, and we start to see that fracture in that relationship, they're frustrated, they're stressed out about doing that kind of work. We know that that's when we have to step in and that we've maybe, expected too much of them. And I would say that, you know, every volunteer is replaceable. We don't want to replace them, but they should be, because we should know that they have support behind them so they can go live their lives. They can come in and do their volunteer work and feel good about it and not feel stressed or beholden to the organization. And then here's the other thing, we leverage talent and experience. So that goes a couple ways. We leverage talent in terms of finding talent the organization can't otherwise afford, and talent to meet the unique needs of those that we take care of. So, like for example, this little guy with this puppeteer in probably in a healthcare setting. We're not hiring clowns and we're not hiring entertainment probably, but we could find those people that will do those. And then the experience. We have such an amazing opportunity to tailor and to customize that experience for those that we serve and make it a positive experience through our volunteer talent pipeline. Let me just stop here and think, how does this resonate with you? Do you feel like you have the talent there? Is this like a new way of thinking about your role? What are your thoughts? Or do you not agree? Feel free to come off of mute if you need to. Well, I won't put anyone on the spot, but I'm going to take your silence to mean you agree. And I do see something in the chat. Is there something there? Oh, agree. Thank you, Tina. Yeah, great. Okay, so moving on here. So our job, and I mentioned this briefly just a moment ago, our job as leaders is to remove barriers to performance. And I want you to think what those barriers could be. It could be something as simple as things that are on your application. It could be um, it could be things that are stopping volunteers from moving forward with your organization right from the beginning. It could be, an improvement in the training so that they feel uh, better and, more engaged and more satisfied with their service. It could also mean the problems that they encounter when they're volunteering. It could be equipment, it could be just a, process, whatever it is. And so this is another part of your job, is that you need to look for those barriers and remove them. What could be those barriers? When I was in healthcare, we would have to do TB testing. But initially, we could only do the testing at certain times, and then the person had to go back and have it read. And so what we found is that we could get a lot of people in the door and then they dropped off from that. And so one way that we removed a barrier to people who were, we recognize as busy people engaged in lots of things, is that we made that simple. Once a blood test was available, we were able to do a blood test. And then we were able to get the results. They were done. I mean, they could get the results too, but it was finished after that. That was a huge barrier that we removed. And we were tracking the difference in that. We also had, sometimes we used a lot of technology. And what were those barriers for the technology? And, what we found was there was one time where we had volunteers kept saying, gosh, you know what? These people, when we go to get them to take them out of the hospital because they've been discharged, they're not where we thought they were, or it looks, I don't know where this place is. And so what we found when we did that role and we functioned as a volunteer, staff did as a volunteer, to really understand what was happening. We found that people were, for good reasons, the person might have had surgery and they were taking them, they were opening up the file and they were taking them out of their bed essentially and putting them back in surgery to complete their notes. Well, they weren't really moving them. But the volunteers were having to find workarounds for this. And it was, I mean, they were fine about it, but it was kind of a struggle. And ultimately, it led to longer wait times for for that patient. And we wanted to eliminate those. So we did all that work to find out what exactly was happening. And we learned it was kind of a simple thing, which computers, when they explain it to you, the IT people explain it to you, it is kind of a simple thing, but it was a human error, and we had to go back and educate and work with people to not do that anymore. And then it was resolved. So those are a couple of barriers, but like what other kind of barriers are there? Is it that we don't have training available enough? Is it that we don't have that capacity and to be able to support them, so they have to wait before they can get into the program? It can be a lot of things, but I would look for all those barriers and what are those barriers, and ask people what are those barriers. And then you do those jobs as well. And you walk in the volunteer's shoes and you know what those barriers are so that you can help remove them. That is a huge leadership task. So, um, ultimately, volunteer leaders, you want to be able to inspire commitment. And that's really at the heart of volunteer management, is that you need a commitment. You can have lots of volunteers with zero commitment, and I can guarantee you, you will not be able to have a great volunteer program because people won't show up and things like that. So, leadership, when exercised with value-driven commitment, makes a positive difference. So, and I've talked about this so many times in terms of really connecting with your mission, vision, and values. And really being concrete with your volunteers about what those values mean in terms of their service. And you don't have to make that up. You can ask them to do that and as a group, and then you're like the messenger for new volunteers, but hopefully they see it when they're interacting with others. And so, you walking that walk too, and talking about that in terms of what are your values? And when something comes up, to reevaluate those values and say, this pertains to a value of respect. This pertains to the work that we're going to do on these processes are about innovation or excellence. Whatever your values are, you can make that connection. And then there are concrete ways better leadership impacts organizations. So when volunteers see you in terms of, advocating for them, advocating for new opportunities, keeping them involved, and when problems do arise, that you're involving them, and it's an opportunity to learn versus an opportunity to blame, and that you kind of avoid those punitive mistakes when you're focusing on um, mistakes are usually the fault of bad processes. They see leadership at work. So, um, So when you are helping them overcome any of those challenges, whether it's a challenge just to get people on board, or there's a limit to the kind of volunteer opportunities that you can offer, those are some of those challenges you can help them overcome. Let's see. So um, here is that like that pro that recipe to inspiring volunteer commitment. So I think you have to model the way. I think you have to know yourself and know what your own personal leadership style is. For me, relationships and protecting relationships and showing people respect is always at the forefront, protecting those relationships by modeling professional behavior. And even in those tough conversations, when you have to say, hey, I heard this, I'm concerned, and you're moving into those conversations in a respectful, safe way. And part of that is also for me is um, providing steady leadership. There's not that emotional highs and lows and huge emotional reactions to things. So know yourself. And that comes, I think, with some time. But I think you can also look to your mentors. Who are the people that you respect and that you see them under pressure and you think, wow, they're good. Model that. And so then, so you know yourself. And then um, have a have the ability to be able to share a vision and inspire people through that vision. So set your own vision. What is your organization's vision for the future? And then what is the vision for the volunteer program? Uh, in different organizations that I've been in, it may be the vision is to live in a world without hunger. And then what does that look like? How are volunteers supporting that? And then what is your personal vision in that? Is it making sure that uh, as programs are introduced or ideas are introduced, that you're looking for ways to build sustainability for those initiatives? Like let's say it's a best practice, but there's just not enough people in your organization to be able to sustain it and make it happen. But you could with volunteers. So part of my personal vision was always to be an out of the box problem solver. And I could bring the strength and the power of people and resources to a project through volunteers. And it may be through financial support from volunteers. It may be through hours and time. A lot of times it's hours and time, which is the most precious thing of all. No matter what, you can't buy more of it, you can't get more of it. There's just not, there's no way you could do that. You only have so much time. And the fact that they're willing to share it with you is such an incredible blessing. But set your vision. What is your vision for your organization? What is the vision for your role in the organization? And out of that comes an opportunity to be able to really challenge processes. So you challenge and you change processes, you work through things, you collaborate with other people, and you're finding barriers and you're tearing them down. I almost think about like I had the blocks over there, but like the Berlin Wall so many years ago that came down, and that, it's that constant challenge of the things that are holding you back, the constant things that are holding volunteers back from being a real true force in an organization. Really having that ability to be able to share that. I wanted to say one more thing about a shared vision. I've been a part of organizations where not, I mean, this isn't uncommon, and we're in a period of time right now with all the things happening at the federal level and funding for nonprofits. Even our organization is very challenged. And it's a scary time. It's a time of we don't know what's going to happen next. And so I'm wondering how many of you have had those conversations with your volunteers and shared with them what you know will change, what will not change. my guess would be, your organization's commitment to your cause will not change. Will funding, will programs change? Are we going to look for ways to be leaner, meaner, and more innovative? 100%. Are we going to need volunteers more than ever? 1,000%. And that their role and their commitment to the organization is so valued and so appreciated, and that they're important to you. I hope that you're having those conversations and setting them up to say, hey, let's talk. Let's figure out how we're going to continue. We know we're going to need more volunteers because the commitment to this cause is not going away, but we may have to deliver services differently to those that we serve. So having that shared vision, having them in, not creating a sense of fear or panic, but the reality that they are needed is absolutely crucial. And so challenging processes, this kind of would naturally come when, things have to change. And instead of saying, we're going to do away with this because we don't have that grant anymore, we can't afford it. Challenge that process. Is there any way that we could bring in the right kind of people who could do this as a volunteer? Could we recruit an XYZ person with that skill set? Is it possible? What is possible? And just keep asking that. What if? What if? How about this? So challenge the process, challenge the status quo, and then work to define what those barriers are and work with your leadership to take those down. And then enabling others to act. This is intelligent risk taking. This is really a skill that we don't talk enough about. Intelligent risk taking to me is you have figured out, the trends, the metrics, the data, and you're going to try something. And it may cost some money, it may involve resources, but you're going to enable others to act. And so your job as a volunteer manager, coordinator, director, volunteer management leader is to set up people to be able to do the work that's needed. And so you're going to set the parameters, you make the position description, you help develop the training, and then you help find the people to funnel into that. But you're going to enable others to act. And then you're going to encourage with heart. And that's the expression of, the work, the feeling, the gratitude, the things that keep them going. These are all a span of leadership commitment and helping people connect to the purpose and the cause so you keep them going and you keep re-recruiting them to do bigger and better things. And when MLK says anyone can be great because anyone can serve, that is so very true. We all have different skill sets and things like that, but really and truly, with the right people, which are you can create a great amount of sustainability in your organization to be able to support your volunteers. Any thoughts on that? You can use the chat, you can use the unmute, whatever you'd like.
Well, recently, this is Pam. Recently, I've had a few volunteer applicants, and my mindset initially, a couple of years ago was, well, you just get anybody that wants to volunteer and stuff, but I found that not necessarily the best fit.
Yeah.
And the most recent ones that I've had were people that were for like students, and even though they were in the medical field and I work at a hospice house, they weren't going to be there for the right reasons. They just wanted hours. And then they didn't want to do certain things. So I think, and also I've had another one. I was a retired person, and she was coming on board with all the right written answers, but I got a gut feeling that she wasn't there for the right reasons, and it ultimately turned out to be the right scenario. We
Yeah.
tried out stuff, and when you were talking earlier about, how do you give them feedback or really feel them out and stuff. I have just a real recent experience
Yeah.
with that, and it actually came across really well, which I was glad. And but I do think that enabling them, doing the work up front is going to be really important. I really like the idea of really emphasizing the shared vision and looking at the barriers, which we've reduced some too, but also enabling them to act. I want to give them a confidence and ownership of what we're doing, where we're at, so that they can feel confident to make some decisions with what they want to do and be in there and not feel so alone. I want them to feel supported and have the resources there, and also just the familiarity with the environment they're going to be in. So I'm trying to do a little more emphasis on that area ahead of time.
I love that. And I think that everything you just said relates exactly to this slide, because know yourself. I was talking to someone yesterday and said, gosh, there was one time that I did not follow my instinct. And so we have instincts, we have them for a reason, follow them, because it will save you so much work on the other side. Like you said, the person that on paper looked good, but when you met with them, there were some red flags. It didn't seem like a good fit. Follow that. Yeah, I wish I had in that moment, and it was a learning lesson for me. And then, like you said too, um, the intelligent risk taking. I personally would not be telling others, volunteers, take intelligent risk. We don't really want them to take risk. You take risk in terms of being bold and being able to grow your program and dream and think. But, especially like something with hospice, for example, you may or may not be giving people water. It seems like an innocent thing to do, or move someone maybe seems like an innocent thing to do, but there could be reasons why you can't. So ask first and enable others that is freeing to them if they're asked to do something or they think they should do something. Ask first. That doesn't mean that you're limiting what they're doing, but you're creating a safe place. You're creating, they wouldn't want to harm somebody, things like that. So I think you're on the right track, and I think that there's so much that could be done. And I would say, and I don't know all the details, and I'm sure you're on the right track, but like, they're just looking for hours. Is there something that would be low risk, um, low risk, that you could just try them out on something like a project where, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But, you could be surprised. What the situation is. I'm not telling you you did anything wrong by any means, but, I would try that. But if there's reasons why you don't think that they're a good fit, as I said before in the, in that training before about the onboarding, that being very upfront with them that we're looking for people who are going to be the right fit, and if you're not, we'll help you find another place to go. I think that's perfectly fine, and I think that is also part of this leadership thing, that you care enough so much that even if this isn't the right place, you're willing to send them somewhere else. So bravo to you, Pam. Really. Anyone else?
There was just one more question.
Oh,
Someone asked, how do we attract the best and brightest volunteers?
yeah. So, absolutely. We all want the best and the brightest. And you know what? I learned this too. Keep the best and the brightest for you. Like, for example, I have Katie. Yeah, keep the best and the brightest to help you.
I don't know about that.
Oh, I do. I do. So think about that. And I really I mean that. I heard that one time and I laughed and I thought, oh, actually that's genius. Why wouldn't I do that? So I didn't make that up, but keep the best and the brightest for yourself to help yourself. So how do you do that? Well, I think it's planning and it's that targeted approach to finding where these volunteers are. Who are the people that have the skill set to do what you need done? And sometimes those people are already in your organization, and we just have to engage with them in different ways and re-recruit, re-energize that commitment and relook at how we're doing things. If I'm not sure who asked that, you probably know Katie from the chat.
It
I
was
could
KD. KD.
oh, KD. Okay.
Mhm.
How about I could do office hours and I've made that. I didn't make it announcement last time, but the time before I did. And I met with several people. When I send this out, I will send some office hour times. And how about if I just send a link and anybody wants to get in on that we could just, dive in and kind of put a plan together and talk about that. How does that sound? And then you can get some one-on-one help if you need it. And it doesn't
I
have to be on that. It could be on anything.
I would love
Volunteer
that. I
related.
think I'm one of the people who I'm not getting your emails. So I don't know if you have my
Oh,
wrong email. I don't have anything blocked because
okay.
I don't know how to do
Will
that.
you put your phone number in there? And Katie,
Yeah.
can you grab that from Katie or
Yes.
Melanie? Yeah, okay.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay, thank you. Okay, yep. If for some reason you don't get an email, I sent out a reminder on Tuesday about this. So if you didn't get that, those are getting blocked. So yeah, put your phone number in there and your name and then
Excuse me,
we'll
Melissa, what
find
was
it.
the reminder that you sent out? It was just, was it a,
I sent out the slide deck and I sent out um the learning things from this. There were some different attachments. Yeah, and I always put the link to this in there again too.
I did send you a request earlier over the weekend and that I was wanting to get the link for all of the documents. And can I just put my phone number and email in the chat and then you can just double check it to make sure that's what you've got? Because I
Yeah,
did get the ones that when I asked you separately, I did get
yeah,
those,
yeah,
just so
yeah.
I get the other stuff. I don't remember seeing this last one you talked to me.
Okay, yeah, yeah, and that would have been on Tuesday. Okay, yep, we can do that. Easy peasy. So, okay. So I want you to think about this. This was something that I found in some research that I was doing. So, can we do more with more? We always talk about doing more with less. And this is that shared vision of volunteer leadership and engagement. So, so apparently, given the right circumstances, we certainly can. And this was from another organization. The Strengthening Organizations Mobilizing California, which is a capacity building initiative to support leadership learning. This is what's important. Found that organizations found that they could do more with less funds by doing more with more leadership. And that because and I always try to challenge people on this that you can have funds but you need people and the people with the right leadership, the right skills, the right direction and the right ideas and the right mindset. So this really kind of comes back to the idea that you are a leader in your organization. You are the leader of the non-paid workforce, which is a very mighty, very powerful, you have mighty and powerful opportunities, and to capture those by bringing in the best of the best and dreaming beyond where you're at right now. So we always have problems that we have to deal with today. But you want to like try to get yourself from an organization of want to an organization of have. And you have the opportunity to do that. You can do that. You can bring volunteers in to do things that you never thought were possible. We do this with skilled volunteers, and there's a story that I had heard, and this isn't anything that I've done, but there was a guy who had graduated from a university, and he was an architect. And he came back to the university, had great connections there, loved the university, and said, you know what, I would really love to do this as a volunteer and design this building for you. And they were like, "Oh, wow." And then it kind of went up the chain of leadership. And then they were like, "What? No, we got to do RFPs, we got to do this, we got to do that." And so, years, months, whatever goes by, and they do it, and the guy, it turns out, he hung in there, and he gets awarded the grant gets awarded the contract to do this building for them. And he says, you know what, I was willing to do this a couple of years ago for free. and and here they are, and they're going to pay him now. And think about that you can find some pretty incredible people out there by looking and dreaming and thinking about what are the ways that we could save money for our organization by finding the right skills, the right people. It may be a plumber, it may be an electrician, it may be whatever. But dream small, dream big, and go fast. Find those people and plug those holes that you might have. But it's going to take a lot to find find the holes and know where your organization is going. Here's the other thing. They also found that most organizations defaulted to a hierarchical structure, not because people are power hungry, but they simply didn't have an alternative model to work from. So what's needed with that? I remember talking to a group of volunteers, and I think it was in an interview, and I said, "Well, I'm not the expert, but what I am is the person who can guide the experts to being able to deliver um, the project." And so you're a facilitator, you're a relationship manager, you are a talent pipeline manager. And seeing that and putting your mind in that framework, I think is really a great way to be able to open up your sights to see things very differently instead of what's here right now, and thinking about the future. Can I not move my slide? Okay. So building an inclusive, more effective organization. How do you do that? There's 3 necessary organizational characteristics for leading volunteers. So this may not surprise you. Your ability to adapt leadership styles to the situation. So, and what I mean by that is that, to go out and find the best and the brightest is you're adapting your approach differently for a teen group versus a professional skilled group. Your approach, the way you set it up, the way you prepare for those meetings, the way you prepare for going in to recruit them is different. So being adaptable, and then being adaptable in terms of changing your situation, changing your approach to things. One approach works great with talking with authority, and then talking with an authority in another area, it doesn't work so well. So that adaptable leadership style. And you can think about people who you've seen in your lives who can adapt and they can function well in one group and change their style and their approach for another group. And then you see people who they only have one, and it's like they can't see or hear or understand things beyond that. It's just theirs, and that's that one thing that they can do. Those people don't do great in these kind of roles. So adapting your leadership style, and sometimes it's a skill that you have to learn. It's not something you have to be born with, but that adaptive leadership style. You need to have staff that are willing to take ownership. It isn't just on us. We need to do a lot to prepare the volunteers and to communicate and work with our colleagues to make sure that they understand who's coming, what their skills are, what can they do, and that this is what you think that they're going to need for help. But beyond that, um, you need them to take ownership in terms of helping to create the environment that volunteers deserve to be able to, that volunteers deserve and need to be able to function in. And then that really goes into that culture, that culture of trust. Staff and volunteers have to be able to, work together, take risk without negative consequences. And those risks, in what I mean, are not, well, I just thought I would try this and see. No, I mean like try, and you probably don't know what that means, I'm sorry. You're not asking them to break a rule to go do something, but that culture of trust that you can be there for your clients. You can deliver good customer service. And what does good customer service look like? I used to have someone that I worked with that said, give away free stuff. Doesn't mean you're giving away the desk or a stapler or something, but you're giving away free stuff like a smile, like, oh, here, let me walk you there. Let me, is there something you need help with? Can I pick up your bag? Those kind of little things that show respect and show acceptance and love for the people that you're serving. Those kind of things. And then what happens when something goes wrong? Things go wrong. People make mistakes. What if that volunteer made a terrible, terrible mistake? What does that look like? And is it like, okay, how does that look? And helping volunteers understand that hopefully what we're not doing is we're not having a punitive session here about a punitive response. And they may initially think that it's going to be punitive and that they're going to be in big, big trouble. Well, let's be honest. Usually there's an opportunity to learn. And sometimes, I would say exactly that. We had something go on and I want to talk to you about it, but this is an opportunity for us to learn. And so that's, in the spirit that I'm talking to you about this, in the spirit of making sure that we can learn from this and move on. And so uh, I always make sure that I keep that volunteer's respect and self-esteem intact during this as well. So, um, and flexing, that leadership muscle in terms of being able to, look at things in a different light and look at things in, that they can bring things to you and they can say, I made a mistake. We would have this thing that we would do in healthcare where if you messed up, you fussed up. And really, honestly, it is kind of really empowering when you think about that. It's like we expect that a mistake is going to happen, but it's so much worse when you just try to hide it, right? And for a lot of reasons, I mean, self-esteem, embarrassment, being ashamed, maybe being asked to leave the organization, you don't want to have those kind of things happen. So, uh, and having that culture of, if you're going to do anything different, like a process different, talk to someone first, ask. There could be a reason. And then having that they have the ability to say, I don't know, or I have to go find out before I do this. Let me go ask. That's where that culture of trust begins. And that those are really good things to be able to teach someone and have organizational characteristics of a safe place for volunteers to serve. So here's 4 critical organization prerequisites to build an inclusive, more effective organization. So do you have leadership that's a champion for change? And a lot of times in nonprofits we do, but if we don't, that's okay too. But a champion for change, someone who's always looking at doing something better, an investment in time up front with knowing that there's a reduction of efficiency on the outset. So what I mean by that is we would in process improvement, they talk about plan, do, check, act. So you plan something, and 75% of your time in doing a change is planning. A very small part is actually doing it. Another big chunk of the time is actually spent in making adjustments. So looking at how things went. So that plan, do, check, act. So plan, plan, plan. I think it was Albert Einstein that said if he had a problem and only an hour, he'd spend like 59 minutes thinking about it. It seems kind of crazy, but it's absolutely true. Only just a small percentage of the effort and the time is done on doing, but more of it is spent on planning and then perfecting it. Management fundamentals already in place. So, what are those management fundamentals? And what are those things about trust and feedback and collaboration? What are all those things that are in place? And explicit leadership responsibilities in job descriptions. And so your job description, not your position description, your job description, because it's yours, it should really talk about what that leadership expectation is. Is it that you deliver service with respect? Is it that you work collaboratively with others? Those kind of things. And it should also mirror your values as well and your behavior standards. But these are some things to think about. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions about this part? Oh, I see some things in the chat. Okay, great. Um, okay, so I have some great tips for volunteer leadership. And you've heard this before, so maybe if you've been with me, understanding where your organization is going, understanding what those big barriers are, what's preventing your organization from achieving everything that it could achieve. Convey challenges and inspire action. I know a few years ago, I had to deliver some really kind of like harsh news to volunteers about our funding in our organization. And I thought I could do this one of two ways. I could say, womp womp, here's what's happening. Or I could say, this is a time for us to step up and we need to come together and we need to think about this together. And this is why I'm sharing this with you. I'd like to have an opportunity to meet with people and figure out, if you have ideas, I want you to bring them forward. And what a difference that was, and what I had heard and how we repackaged it and delivered it. And it really revitalized that commitment for volunteers to give and to be there. And so be creative and be fearless. Be fearless of, like, oh no, that's a staff role, or only a staff person could do this, or that would be beyond anything I could do. Think about it, plan it out. You could do just about anything, I believe. And so be creative and be fearless for your organization and your organization's future. And then demonstrate the value of volunteers. We used to do a cost and contributions report. As I told you about, we will ask you for your hours and your volunteer numbers and what that looks like. That's demonstrating the value of volunteers and those stories about volunteers and the impact that volunteers make with your clients. And maybe going out to your clients and asking is a great way to keep those stories in your back pocket. And then being able to understand like what the full-time equivalent of your volunteers are to staff and the hours, how many staff hours you saved, and what was the value dollar. You could use the independent sector, you could use another form. If you have a volunteer that's providing professional skill sets to you, what would that fair market value of that volunteer be? And then walking a mile in the volunteer shoes and having others do it too. During National Volunteer Week and at other times, I would have our leadership team shadow volunteers. They would do the volunteer job. The volunteer would train them to do the job. And we would invite senior leadership and board members in to do that. They were all people that were safe to do that and things like that. But it was a real eye opener to them to understand what our volunteers did and the impact that our volunteers made. And so I thought that was always a really great way to highlight the stories of volunteerism and for them to understand it was beyond just a nice thing. They were doing real work for our organizations. Has anyone else done that by chance? Like volunteer shadowing?
I've
That's
only
part of the hands-on support that I try to offer is doing it with them, going
Yeah,
to the center with them, meeting them there. We have like a checklist, like,
good.
showing them where like they can put their things, showing them where the emergency exit is, showing them because we have kids, so like you're not responsible for like their medical emergencies, but just showing where their medical emergency stuff is,
Yeah,
those kind of things, and then just kind of going there with them when I
yeah.
can. So that's part of my job.
Yeah, exactly. And have you had your senior leadership or your board members do that?
The go through
Yeah,
the
like
process.
shadow with a volunteer, shadow with an experienced volunteer.
No, I don't think we have. I think that's a good
Yeah.
idea though.
Yeah, so they really understand like how important your volunteers are. Yeah. And it really is it's a point of pride for the volunteers typically that they are gonna, we want you to show them what you do, show them how you do this. And they want to learn and know more about what our volunteers are doing. Yeah. Yeah. So think about who your key stakeholders are and what that might look like and your leadership team. Yeah, thank you. So let's see. How can you inspire and engage? Well, first of all, I would say ask for help, gather people together. I would start with your volunteers and your colleagues, and then, share how can we help? And I have asked that question before and put that out in these trainings that if you were to ask your peers or your leadership team, what would we do if we had an extra $1 million? Or if we had unlimited people resources, what could we do? Another thing is be a great storyteller. Illustrate the vision and inspire belonging. Even when times are tough, it's it's best to, be more communicative when times are tough because if you aren't, then people tend to try to make their own stories up and what does this look like? And so inspire belonging, inspire them to step up. And it's okay to do that with volunteers. They love that. And you have volunteers that come from all walks of life. Challenge, there's probably a good chance that you've had some pretty great volunteers that have, done some great things in their careers that could help you and give you the guidance and the help to see things and do things maybe differently. Do change with volunteers, not to volunteers. And believe me, I've made this mistake before and oh my gosh. I mean, I still feel like oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. But never make big decisions without working it through with the volunteers. Be honest, be real with them. And, I've had times when things happened a lot faster than I expected, like, okay, no, you're going to do this now. And I've been honest with the volunteers, like, hey, this is what I got. Um, this is not the way I expected, but here we are. So what could we do? And they've been so appreciative of that. They're part of the team. You're doing it with them, not to them. And then I don't have a poll, but I wanted to let you know I've got some resources from today's presentation that I'll follow up. Katie's going to help me, and she'll make sure I follow up with those that we somehow missed on this thing. And I'll even see if I can go back and on the registration list, like what is that email looking like? And it occurs to me one other thing. I will often send it from me, but I'll blind copy you. So, and I think that it does something with like, if there was ever something wrong with the email, but it could be that maybe your email is tagging that or something, or flagging that. So, maybe I need to be careful about that too. But anyway, I'm going to stop the recording. And are there any questions or anything that you would like me to touch base on before we go? I'm going to stop the recording though. Okay.